And we are live. Let's see. Make sure it's working on both channels. Let's see here. All right, it's working on yours. Why is it not coming up on mine? There it is. Okay, it's coming up on mine too. All right. You are looking nice and crisp. Oh, it's a little glitchy, but that's okay. If it glitches out during this, we'll just use the audio portion of it, or maybe we'll have you redo it. But please just identify, state your name, and tell us how you're related to Zach. Oh, now all of a sudden it got glitchy.
There we go.
Yep.
There we go. It was trying to figure out the connection. Hey, David, how you doing? Thanks for joining us.
Now you can hear. All right, let's start that over. Can you? This is behind the scenes. Everyone's getting a taste of how these interviews go. And so, for those of you who are watching in the chat and watching us live, we're doing a recording for an interview of Solomon for the purposes of the Zachariah Anderson documentary that I'm doing. I've done a number of these with a variety of people, but because it's Solomon, because you guys know him, know his story, and we're dual streaming on his channel, we thought we'd do it live because why not? So we're not going to be pulling up chats or anything. This is right now, at least, is for the purposes of this documentary. So, Solomon, just identify your name and how you're related to Zach, or how you know Zach.
I'm Solomon Anderson. I am Zachariah's brother, his younger brother by 4 years.
And tell me a little bit about Zach when you guys were growing up. First of all, where did you grow up?
We grew up north of Milwaukee, about it's about a half hour, 40 minutes north of Milwaukee, between Random Lake and Port Washington for the most part. In Wisconsin, I should say. Random Lake and Port Washington, Wisconsin.
Sure, no problem. And so talk to me a little bit about your childhood. I know you've shared some stuff in the past, but tell me a little bit about growing up with Zach, what childhood was like, and all that.
Well, we grew up in a separated household. Our parents got divorced actually when I was born, so they split up, and we ended up primarily with my mother.
I'm sorry, I can hear your little one in the background.
Oh, all right.
I don't know if that's going to be an issue.
Well,
it'll be an issue for me trying to edit it out.
Let me give her a second to try and get him calmed down.
Okay.
Before I restart, I know this is.
Jen, come on, get out of the chat and take care of the child. All right.
Babies ruin everything, right?
They're it's a double-edged sword for sure, isn't it? They're ruin everything, but then make everything better at the same time.
Yeah, that's true.
Thanks, well, it was funny. So I interviewed a DNA expert, and at one point the door opened behind her, and her kid was running around in the background. I'm like, well, we just redo this. You're not the only one, so don't worry about that. Okay, so if you could start over with childhood, go through how many brothers and sisters you have and all that stuff, and go through your childhood a little bit if you won't mind.
Sure. I'm listening. He's fussing just a little bit. Can you hear it?
Yeah, we can keep going. If it's, I could probably get it over to Veilhammer, and maybe he can edit it.
Maybe I can. Let me see if I can turn down my mic sensitivity, and then, and it might help.
Okay.
Just as in case.
You might be able to go into StreamYard settings too, and under your audio, reduce mic background noise. You can click on that. That might help as well.
I think she got him upstairs. Okay.
All
right. Well, I am the fourth child of a total of 9 brothers and sisters. So Zach's the second eldest. We have my eldest, which is Josh, who has the Christmas tree farm. Then Zach. Then my next elder brother, who passed away when he was 9 months old. He drowned in the bathtub before I was born, so I never got to know him or anything. But in an unfortunate accident in my mother's care, so it was just a thing that ended up kind of driving a wedge between our parents. And then, as far as I've gleaned from because I, of course, wasn't alive at the time. I was kind of the last efforts in trying to salvage their marriage before it ultimately dissolved. So I was born, actually, they were already separated when I was born. And then after I was born, the divorce was finalized. And then my mother had a daughter after me. And then my dad was married with no children with his second wife, and then got married for a third time, and then had two more children with his third wife, while my mother had a couple other kids with two other husbands. So 9 altogether. I have one younger brother. Almost all of my siblings younger than me are sisters, and so out of 9 kids, it's actually almost a 50-50 mix of boys and girls. But with that, my elder two remaining brothers, and I grew up very close together because we were living with my mom until I turned about 5. It was the summer after I turned 5. So it was 1989, summer of 1989, give or take. And then mom put us on the phone in turn, and she sold most of her belongings, and she moved to Texas, taking my younger sister, my half sibling, with, and gave the other 3 of us to my dad. Everything was going great.
So you said 1989. How old were you? And you, Zach, and what's your other? Well, I don't know if you want to mention your other brother.
Josh is the eldest one. He was listed in the court documentation. He's the one that owns the Christmas tree farm. Okay. So yeah, Josh, Zach, and me. We moved in with my dad in '89, and so we had like shared placement where we would spend like weekends with my dad, before that. But we definitely made that transition during that time. Mom left, and we didn't see her until I was like 11. Not even speak to her. So like 6 years later, and not to be defined by childhood trauma, but what it created was codependency between my brothers and me. We really relied on each other, especially after my dad's second divorce. We were kind of lone wolves. It was like my dad and the 3 of us, and my dad was a single dad with 3 boys, and he had to work to earn money, which meant that we had to, in some respects, be proficient or independent. And so the 3 of us needed to take care of each other and look out for each other, which is kind of why I'm here fighting for Zach. Through our lives, he has looked out for me in a lot of ways, and so has Josh. And that's just the way we operate. It's never been a question. It's because we have to. Does that make sense?
No, it does. Did you and Zach ever live together outside of your father's home at all?
Sure. Yeah. So there was a point in my life where I was living in the Twin Cities, and my girlfriend at the time was an abusive alcoholic, and I was telling Zach that I was worried that that when I would grab her hands, grab her wrists, and try and like hold her and stop her from punching me, that she would contact the police, or someone would call, because she'd get like a bruise on her wrist. Because if you're familiar, people that have issues with alcohol, they don't know their strength. They're trying to fight, and then they get bruises just from being detained. So I would grab her wrists, and I was worried that I would end up getting arrested for abusing her or something. And so I was telling him that I was really worried about it, and that I didn't want to losing my son. And so he found me a job and actually rented a U-Haul and drove all the way up to the Twin Cities to load up all of my belongings and move me out of there, like really like flight for life. Just come and get me and move me out. And I moved in with him to start the job and to basically hit the restart of my life. And I lived with him for about 2 years as an adult, give or take, like on and off. And I mean, it's not easy living with your adult brother, but we figured it out, and he helped me, really get back on my feet and start the trajectory that I've been on since. That's how eventually I ended up starting my business, doing remodeling and things like that.
Now, did you work with Zach at all? You talked about starting your business. Did you work with him, or did you work for each other, or anything like that?
It was my business, so I did the construction remodeling, and Zach would help me out. So he would help me out with a lot of times it was like demolition and cleanup, painting, because he was a painter when he was younger, and things like that. Those were really his major skills that he performed on my job sites. Other than that, he had some interesting and outside the box solutions to some issues. Like I was talking to him about rebuilding a curved stepped newel post installation, and I was going through some of the math and drawing up exactly what I wanted to build on it, and he made a suggestion of building a sandwiched plywood template to solidify the 4x4 in the floor, and it was brilliant. It was an excellent idea, and I hadn't thought of it myself. I was thinking of stick framing it, which is a little cheaper and a little less time consuming, but it's not as stable. And so like little things like that, where he would help, problem solve for, sort of like the goals of the business, exactly what I was doing, trying to improve, time, how to get my guys to do the job right the first time, how to make my time, more worthwhile, because I was really burning candle on all ends while I had the business. So he was just being a big brother and trying to work through it with me and help me out. But yeah, he did some administrative stuff where he would take care of running paperwork, taxes, and do stuff like that for me too. But other than that, those were his major tasks or positions, or whatever, his duties as a member of my company or when he was on my payroll.
And you talked about some of his ingenuity. How was Zach at school?
Well, in high school or after?
like high school,
Oh, he did the bare minimum in high school. I think that both he and my eldest brother had figured out how to get by with graduation, because that was really all they wanted to accomplish. I mean, to be fair, I didn't focus on getting straight A's when I was in high school either. So that may shock you, but I was, for the most part, very bored in high school, and that meant that I didn't bother trying, and that was unfortunate. I didn't turn in a lot of homework, and so I got like a very average GPA, but I did graduate. And so, we weren't a very studious household. That also is, part of the single parent, whether or not they're there the whole time, or, on you about making sure your homework's done. It's just, we made it. We made it through. We got our education or certificates afterwards. Zach got an associate's degree, and then he worked for AT&T, did some manual labor, running cable, pulling wire, and being like an install tech for AT&T, and eventually ended up on the West Coast, babysitting the fiber optic head that connects Japan and the United States, which is a national security infrastructure site. So that was really interesting thing to hear him like kind of tell me what kind of knowledge, like tell me the stuff that he did have to know about caring for a fiber optic node that could kill you because of the amount of electricity that ran through it.
Now, was Zach at all like an athlete, a popular guy in high school, or anything like that, or
I
was
mean, he
he
was
just
popular. Zach was very popular. He was popular because at the time, I mean, consider how old he is, right? He turns 44 this year, and that means that right around when he was like a freshman in high school, Titanic was a big deal, and Leonardo DiCaprio looked very young at the time. So he was very popular because he had like longer hair. He looked almost like a double of Leonardo DiCaprio. So I think during the trial, someone had cited that he was like a Walmart Leonardo DiCaprio, something like that.
and you get Leonardo DiCaprio on Wish, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's I mean, to be fair, if Zach had the amount of money that Leonardo DiCaprio does, maybe he would look a lot like Leo now. So who knows? Uh but he was always very popular as a kid. He he grew up during a time where it was popular to party, so was he was very good at throwing parties and getting people together and having a good time and being kind of a social butterfly. And so that was a big part of his social circle during that time. But I think eventually he grew out of it. I think in his early 20s, he made some friends when he was painting houses and used to go clubbing, dancing, doing stuff like that, and in Milwaukee and Chicago quite a bit. But eventually grew out of that too, like we all do.
You said that he was a social butterfly. Was he able to get along with people fairly well?
Yeah, he's we always say that like he's like the life or the death of the party, right? Like he's either the most charismatic, funniest guy in the room, or he's surly and he just wants to be left alone. Like it's one or the other. And when he's out and about, generally he's very charismatic, very personable, and he's always had that gift. So that was one of the things, like as a kid, that had looked up to him as my older brother for that, because he had quick wit, and he was just naturally funny, and could talk to women very easily. Like he was just good at being social.
Now, do you know when he first met Sadie Beecham?
It was 2007. So in 2007, I believe that he met Sadie through a mutual friend of theirs. So they met through a mutual friend, and then they hooked up or something, and from there it was like fireworks. They just like they hit it off, and they got pregnant, or Sadie got pregnant after I don't even know how many months, but it was less than a year that they were together. And to what Zach had told me, she wasn't supposed to be able to get pregnant, and so they were kind of shocked, and they decided to keep who was now my niece, Owain, and they never looked back.
Did they? They were never married, though, correct?
They never did get married. No.
Okay. When, I mean, when they first got together, did your brother tell you anything about her, or if so, what did he say?
I mean, I met her. I think that first summer, if I remember correctly, I came back from college. I was back in Port Washington, and we went out for some drinks. And one of my close childhood friends was bartending, and we hung out. I met her. I believe that was before she was pregnant. So, but we didn't talk a lot, or Sadie and I didn't talk a lot that night. But that was the earliest memory, or the first memory that I have of her. Was that night, just hanging out, having drinks at the bar.
Now, they Zach and Sadie eventually moved in together, right?
He did, yeah. Zach moved in with her. She had a condo that ended up eventually going to foreclosure, and he bought it on a sheriff's sale to make sure that she didn't lose it, because Sadie had purchased it with the inheritance from her mother's passing. So something like that. I wasn't there for that, but to my understanding, that was a big piece of why Zach wanted to salvage and save the unit, is because Sadie had lost it, getting caught up, being behind on bills, and so he made sure to keep it, and so he actually had the deed, but he left it in her name so he could, when he had earned the money back from purchasing it, he could tear up the sheriff's deed and she could have kept it.
So was she paying him then for the condo after he purchased it? Was that the idea?
No, he just put a renter in, because when it was foreclosed on, she had to move out. So she moved out into a different location, and then he bought it at a sheriff's sale. He ended up renting it to somebody, and then was collecting the rent to cover the cost of the maintenance of the unit, the homeowners association fees, and then a little bit in profit to pay down the value that he spent on buying it on sheriff's sale. But it was meant to be eventually just a gift back to Sadie.
Did he ever give it back to her that you know of?
No.
Do you know who owns it now?
Technically, it's still under her name.
It's under her name, but he bought it.
He bought the sheriff's deed, but you have to take the sheriff's deed and take it to the registrar of deeds and get it transferred into your name. And instead of doing that, he kept the sheriff's deed.
Oh,
and
okay.
Instead of paying the transfer back and forth, he just completely covered the costs of the unit, left it in her name, so then he could walk up to her at some point and just give her the sheriff's deed, or burn it in front of her or whatever, and tell her that it's hers and it's always been hers. That's what he told me was his intent, at least with the property.
Okay, but do you have any idea what happened to that sheriff's deed?
I believe my eldest brother has it right now.
Okay.
I believe Josh has it.
Was the condo ever a point of contention between the two that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. He like never held it over her head, or she never complained about it?
Nope.
Now, how did Sadie get along with your family?
Just fine until all of this.
Even after the breakup?
I mean, they had some rocky times in their relationship. They had some times where, like any relationship with toxic tendencies, where they would get into disagreements or whatever it was, and Sadie made a point of trying to recruit Josh and me to intervene with Zach. And almost every time that she reached out to me, and I would call Zach and ask him what's going on, he would tell me that it wasn't anything big, and he wasn't sure what she was worked up about. They had just argued about some stuff, and he left. So
okay, sorry if you had more to say.
I mean,
trying not to I was just trying not to overtalk you for the purpose of the recording, but
yeah, just verbal arguments to any of my understanding. And the only time that there was anything else was when she had stolen thousands of dollars from him, taken her or gone on a trip to Arizona with her best friend, lied to him about it, didn't pay for the twins' childcare with the money that he had given her, and then blew all the money somehow, and then ducked him when she got back from the trip. Called her aunt to pick her up from the airport, and then avoided him completely while he was circling the terminal with all three children in his van. So he had all 3 kids. It was like 11, or the twins at least, because I think my niece was with Sadie, but he had the twins in the van with him, and he's just driving around so he doesn't get ticketed for being parked in the terminal. And so she just ducked him completely, refused to answer the phone, and then he finally got a hold of her aunt at some point, and then went over to her house and was understandably irate. But he didn't. I think he smashed his own television because it was his TV that was there, and like broke a couple of things in the house. But that was it. But he never like laid a hand on her. Nothing like that.
Were there any criminal charges that resulted from that at all?
I think it was disorderly conduct that he was charged with, but eventually he was thrown out, or it was fine. You might be able to find it on CCAP, but to my understanding, that was it. And then there was an altercation that Sadie had talked about, which was Christmas Eve 2019, where he talks about her, trying to hit him with a broom and then hitting him in the chest or pushing him a bunch of times. And she tripped over her own Christmas decorations, and then claimed that he pushed her or hit her.
Did you ever? Sorry.
And to my understanding, he never laid a hand on her. I wasn't there, but she claims that he was abusive in that situation, but she was swinging at him, which I find to be odd. Now, the transcript may or may not be on our website right now, and that transcript outlines that the judge, listening to each of them, because she had moved for an injunction against him, and the judge even said, "I can't tell who is the abuser, the aggressor, and who's the victim in this circumstance. It's too unclear, so I will not uphold an injunction." So the judge for the civil restraining order threw it out because it was unclear who was being abusive. And it was in that court appearance that Zach first understood that Sadie was breaking up with him, because before that she didn't communicate that effectively.
And you said that was 2019 they broke up, or that hearing was anyways?
The hearing was in January of 2020.
Okay. Had you witnessed any of these fightings or verbal altercations at all? Okay.
No. I saw Zach have a phone call with her where they were arguing on the phone, but nothing like that. They were always getting along fairly well when they were at the same place at the same time, showing up to family functions. Like on May 2nd, 2020, when Sadie showed up to my sister's birthday party at the Christmas tree farm, they were getting along just fine. They weren't lovey-dovey, but they were getting along.
Now, the hang on. Sorry, I got some notes here. No, I'll just jump to this. When did you first find out that Zach was being charged with essentially the murder of Rosalio?
That's a good question. I think it wasn't until I think it was July. Now I have to try and think about that. I think it was July of 2020. It was a while. Because when he was arrested, I was in a meeting. I was meeting with a client, going through and measuring out a job for a quote, and so Josh actually drove down to Zach's to try and be there for him, because 2 guys had shown up, and Zach had asserted that he thought one of them was armed, and he was worried about his safety, and he just wanted someone else around as a just in case, a witness. And so Josh left I think he was at the tree farm. He left the tree farm and drove down to meet with Zach.
Did to your knowledge, did Zach ever have firearms or around him or in his home?
Nope. No, firearms weren't allowed in his house. When he was like 18 years old, something like that, he got charged with a felony, and so he wasn't allowed to own a firearm, and he didn't want a firearm on the premise of his home at all. Like, it wasn't welcome there. So anytime, even when, like, I have a friend that has like concealed carry, he wasn't even comfortable with the concealed carry being on his property. Just didn't want guns being on his property. It just wasn't for him. He was at a party when he was like 20 years old, and he was robbed at gunpoint, and that might have had a small piece of it. Somebody walked into the party and pulled the trigger and shot a bullet through the floor between his feet, and robbed him at gunpoint. And so guns, he just wasn't a fan of guns. Being, he called his house his solace, his place. That was his sanctuary. That's what he called it, his sanctuary. And guns weren't welcome on the sanctuary. He actually liked having the wildlife around. He liked watching the deer and the turkeys and stuff like that. So he just wasn't the type of person to want to have guns on premise whatsoever. So no gun welcomed his home. He wasn't a gun person. We did shoot guns as teenagers and as kids, but it wasn't a part of his life as an adult.
Now, in 2020, how far away were you living from Zach?
I lived about 12 minutes away from his house.
How often would you go over there?
All the time. My business operated partially off of his property, so my dumpster was actually on the property, and the shop that was attached to his garage was where I stored a lot of building materials and tools. And so after he was arrested, while the police had the property, actually didn't know what the status of the property was, like a week later, and I went to go dump debris from a demolition, and they wouldn't let me. So I was denied. So I had to drive around with a truck full of refuse until I made time to go to the dump and unload the whole thing and pay for it out of pocket.
So would you pop over there like unannounced, or would you tell them ahead of time you were coming over?
Totally unannounced. I pop in there all the time.
Okay. Safe to say you didn't see any dead bodies there?
No.
I'm just wondering, like, okay, so we have a house that is that you have at least one brother coming by randomly, quite often, because he runs a business out of there.
Plus my 2 employees.
Plus your so plus 2 employees. And how many other people are randomly stopping by this house?
I mean, Freddie, who lives, I guess, down the road from my brother's place. He worked with Susan Brown Williamson, her son, who's a friend of mine. And so Freddie would stop by. It's not like we didn't have friends in and around Mequon and Cedarburg. There were people that would stop by frequently, including, the girl that he was dating, Christine Remsburg. She lived 3 minutes away. So it doesn't even make sense that he would have anything on that premises that would connect him to a heinous crime like that. It doesn't even make any sense whatsoever.
Now, were you or any of your employees or Freddie or anyone else? I know his girlfriend at the time was interviewed by police, but was anyone else interviewed by police?
I mean, I was interviewed by police. Freddie, I believe, gave a statement. Both of my employees, one of my employees was working part-time with Zach, doing odds and ends after he stopped working for me during this time. He was at Zach's house the Friday before he was arrested. I saw him there that day. He was doing the demolition up at Susan's house up in Belgium with Zach. My other employee was there the week before he got interviewed. Christine was interviewed. Christine's sister was interviewed. I'm not sure how many other people exactly, but quite a few.
Now, this is a house. It's out kind of in the middle of nowhere. It's on some wooded property, my understanding. Is that correct? And
Yeah,
there's 2 fire pits.
one fire pit, one burn barrel.
Okay. So what was the burn barrel used for?
It was barely used, honestly. The burn barrel was supposed to be used for potentially trash, but it was only used a handful of times. For the most part, the fire pit was used because it was used so frequently that he could just burn whatever he wanted in it.
How often was it used? Do you know?
It depends on the time of year. Sometimes it was used several times a week. Sometimes you would save up wood and have one big fire. Seasonally he had like a regular like Halloween fire where he would invite people over and people would come set up tents and sleep in the yard or whatever, and he would have like a little Halloween hullabaloo where he'd sit around the fire and have some beers and laugh and stare up at the stars because it was private enough that you could do that. And he had a big open field to the west of his house. So there's like the main area of the fire pit, but there's a massive open grassy area because it was 4.78 acres. And so you had enough space where you could set up a pavilion if you wanted.
Now, when did Zach move into that home, or when did he purchase it?
2011.
Okay. And in 2020, it was in disrepair. Essentially, he was renovating it.
Yeah, he had paid off the mortgage, but there were some electrical issues in the house, and so I had actually gutted it when he was living in California to make sure that it didn't burn down while he was away, because I was concerned that it would. And we were talking about it, and we started the renovation process, but he couldn't make up his mind how he wanted the floor plan to ultimately lay out. And so we kind of stopped halfway through, and because we couldn't agree, I told him, "Oh, this is going to be your problem because I'm busy now." And so he came back eventually after he stopped working out in California, and he lived in the house as it was with a semi-operable kitchen. And I mean, the bathrooms worked just fine, just didn't have a lot of insulation and needed work.
You've seen the pictures that were shown during the trial.
Yep.
Is that like the condition it was in?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And my grandmother had passed away. So he had actually gone to my grandmother's house with me, and we cleared out the house and then moved it down into his living room, basically what was left over of all of my grandmother's belongings. And then he was going through and sorting out like sentimental things and pictures and getting rid of stuff that didn't have any meaning to the family or anything like that. But he was doing it on his own time.
So there was a lot more random furniture and things in the house than normally was there.
Yep. There's like down in the basement, there was like my grandmother's old stove and like other random furniture and stuff that was hauled in and set down out of the way to get it just somewhere safe.
Okay. Now, this case was billed as the jealous ex-boyfriend. And I know Zach and Sadie were together for a while, but with other women, presumably he dated other women. Did you notice Zach being jealous at all? Did you pick up on any of that?
No, not even a little bit. Zach wasn't like a jealous, controlling man. He had no reason to be. He didn't struggle with affection from the opposite sex. It was never a problem. He loved Sadie and wanted to be with her. That is true. I would understand him having a feeling of jealousy for someone that he loves. That makes sense to me. But he also had told me about stories of Sadie going through his phone and then messaging people, friends of his and women that he had gotten to know when they were broken up or not seeing each other or whatever it was when he was living elsewhere. So Sadie had harassed a bunch of other people and done things like that. So Sadie had, jealousy and jealous actions as a I guess a contributor to their relationship. So it's it was always more that she was upset about what he was doing than the other way around. He was kind of just okay with it. At the end, it seemed he had told me, oh, it was April of 2020. He said, "Oh, I messed it up. I wish I would have been better to her and better for her, but I hope that she's happy." And to me, that I'm paraphrasing him, but this is something that never rang as him being so obsessed that he couldn't possibly walk away from that relationship. It was the tone of a man who had accepted the fact that the mistakes that he made during the relationship cost him the relationship that maybe he could have been happy in. And it was sort of like a really, really thoughtful lament, if that makes sense.
It does. Describe Zach as a father.
Loving. He didn't parent the way I did. And to his credit, in some good ways, he was playful and gentle. He tried to communicate in a different way with the kids and tried to teach them through play. And so his interactions with them were largely ways to try and teach them independence, responsibility, but also to give them opportunities to do things that they were interested in. In his house, he actually ended up getting you're old enough to know what a projector is, like a projector from school where your teachers would write with the dry erase markers or the permanent markers.
Like an overhead projector.
Yeah, an overhead projector. So he had this overhead projector that he had picked up, and I don't know where he found it, but he grabbed it at some sale, and he set it up at his house. He would use the clear film, and he would pull up like a picture on his computer screen, and he would trace the picture on his computer screen, and then he would put that on the overhead projector, and then he would color it with the kids on the walls. So because he knew that his house was going to need the work, he didn't care about the walls in his house. So he would let the kids just color on the walls and do art on the walls because he was just perfectly comfortable with tearing the walls out or painting them if he needed to. And so he had done this. He had taken Pooh Bear and projected Pooh Bear up on the kitchen wall, and it was Pooh Bear think, and colored that with kids, and done like a zebra in the kids' bedroom upstairs. And when I was living there, I was reading Game of Thrones. I was a big fan of the series. It's unfortunate that Martin hasn't finished the series, but he took the wolf head from House Stark and then projected that on my bedroom wall, and then colored that in, like, the Stark sigil. Had done stuff like that just because he was an outside the box parent in that aspect. Like, for something that most people would be like, don't color on the walls, like, he would let them do it. Like my niece, she was allowed to drive his minivan on his property. He had 4 acres, and when the ground was dry, he would pop in the passenger seat and let her steer around and teach her to at least handle the vehicle on the property. Stuff like that, where maybe other people wouldn't do that with their kids, but Zach did. And in those moments, it's how he showed his kids and would continue to show his children how much he loves them.
Did parenting styles cause a rift at all between him and Sadie, if you're aware?
I mean, the short answer is yes. And the only reason why I know that is because I've heard the recordings.
Okay.
But that's not something that I can talk about to all the details.
Sure.
And the reality is, Zach spent a lot of time trying to de-escalate situations, and maybe he didn't always do it the right way. But he tried. He tried to get their daughter to listen to him, to her mom. He tried to de-escalate someone that was worked up. Sometimes that was Sadie, and sometimes that was their daughter. Sometimes it was both. But he tried.
They were going through a custody battle in 2020, correct?
That's correct.
And they had how old were the twins at that time?
4 going on 5.
And did anybody file anything with regard to the twins? Because correct me if I'm wrong. They had a case already involving their older daughter, right?
That's correct. So he had signed the paternity paperwork when the twins were born, but they didn't have like a custodial agreement on court record for the twins at that time. So there was no like official like placement conditions for the twins, but he did sign all the paternal paperwork. So he acknowledged his parental rights, or his at least his custodial rights.
Do you know, did Sadie file first with regard to the twins, or did Zach file first?
That's a good question. Now, Zach had retained counsel first. So according to the messages exchanged between them, Zach had notified Sadie that he had retained counsel and had filed paperwork. Now, exactly what date that paperwork is filed, I'm not 100% sure on. But Sadie also filed paperwork, so it was right around the same time, like within 1 to 2 weeks of each other filing paperwork, filing affidavits.
If you want to talk about it, that's fine. If not, we'll move on. But do you know if there was something that sparked the desire to file custody paperwork?
Well, can you hear that?
I hear your little one.
It's almost his bedtime. Okay, he's quiet. Zach was the only thing that I know, and I know more, but there's some things that I can't talk about. Zach was concerned about the safety and security of his children, and he was getting reports from their daughter that gave him the impression that the kids weren't being treated well and weren't completely safe and secure in her home.
Did that involve, to your knowledge, Rosalio Gutierrez, or was it completely something different?
Completely something different.
When was the first time you heard the name Rosalio Gutierrez?
After I heard that he was connected to Zach, after the charges, after the arrest. I never heard his name before.
Zach never brought up that name?
Nope.
What about, did Zach ever bring up anything about anyone that Sadie was seeing?
He said that she was dating 4 or 5 dudes,
Did he ever express concern or jealousy about that?
He said that that one of them had a history with drugs and domestic violence, and he was worried about that guy being around his kids, and that was it. He just said that he wished that she had a better taste in men because he didn't want that type of person around his children.
You were there for the trial. Were you there every day?
I couldn't attend every day, but I was there as often as I could.
Okay. Was there anything that concerned you? Well, first of all, let's talk about the pretrial process. Were you communicating with Zach at that point? Obviously, you said you were interviewed by police, but were you communicating with Zach at all?
I wasn't allowed. I wasn't allowed to have contact with Zach until after the first mistrial, I believe.
And okay, so no one's allowed to talk to him, I'm assuming. None of the family?
Yeah, well, Josh, me, the Christine Remsburg, and none of Zach's children, and of course Sadie. So Zach wasn't allowed to talk to the people that he was closest to, which was Josh and me. He wasn't allowed to communicate with Christine either, because she was at his house when he was arrested, and also going to be a witness. And then not with any of his kids, because how else would they break a man?
Now, what was the thought process amongst the family? Were you guys thinking, oh, this is going to be, worked out? They're going to figure out that he had nothing to do with this? Or what was the family thinking? What was everyone thinking?
Well, it depends on when. Now, at first,
well, fair enough. Yeah,
it was not even plausible. Right? It doesn't even make sense. Zach killing a man or disappearing a guy out of a jealous rage is not something that is in his modus operandi. It's not how he works. It's not who he is. He's not a murderer. He's never been a murderer. He continues to not be a murderer, even though he's been convicted. So it still doesn't make sense when reflecting on it. Now, right after he was arrested, we had a lot of worries about what was happening, what they were going to try and stick him with, what charges they were going to try and ping on him, and so it was trying to find appropriate counsel, because we knew that we were going to have to find some sort of representation, some lawyer to then represent him through this. Ultimately, it was up to Josh. Josh found Aubert and Birdsall and signed a contract to represent Zach. And so I was kind of out of the loop on that. I had found a different lawyer, and tried to push for a different law firm, but that didn't work out. Like I said, it was ultimately up to Josh. So Josh signed the paperwork and got him representation. We knew that they were trying to connect him with the missing person case after a fashion. Like I said, I think it was July or something like that in 2020. And then we knew that he was in hot water. Also, it was obvious or evident to us that they were withholding charges. So if we did pay the bail, because we might have been able to meet the cash bail. If we met the cash bail, then the concern was that they would rearrest him and then set another astronomical bail in Ozaukee County then, because he was arrested in Kenosha County for the stalking and eventual disappearing of Rosalio. So then, with the overinflated bail for the stalking charge, because that was all they had on him at the time was stalking when they set a ridiculous bail sum, then were they going to do it again for this marijuana charge in Ozaukee County? And so with limited resources, then we had to make the best out of a bad situation and figure out how we were going to navigate this and not spend all of the money too fast. We didn't want him to be in a position where he couldn't afford representation if they did come and charge him eventually with homicide. It's really important that he was able to fight all the way through. So we didn't make the bail on purpose, and he sat the whole time, which took a lot longer than we thought. You know, it was 33 months then before he actually saw a trial, and 22 months before the first trial. So it was 22 months before they even brought it to trial the first time, which was just an insane amount of time. Like we couldn't even comprehend that. We would never have planned for that. And some of that was because of the games that the lawyers were playing, where the defense attorneys would request information from the prosecutor. The prosecutor would not acknowledge or would not provide it until a week or a couple of days before a hearing. So then the hearing was pushed because the defense attorneys didn't have time to review the documents that were then provided, because the prosecutor was fulfilling their duty but doing it in a way to undermine the defense's capability of providing a complete defense for Zach. So the whole trial process kept getting extended over and over and over again. And every time that they set an extension, it was another 6 months, another 6 months, another 5 months down the road. And so what we thought was going to happen originally was that he would see some sort of trial within a couple of months or a year of the arrest, and it just kept not happening. And largely because the Kenosha DA's games. If the Kenosha police and DA had done their diligence, gotten the information together, and given it to the defense, maybe he could have had trial in a reasonable amount of time, had his right to speedy trial actually honored, and then moved on with something in his life. But that is not what happened, and that wasn't the game that they played. And some of that is intentional, and to my opinion and understanding, was specifically to try and wear my brother down psychologically, emotionally, and financially, to try to break him, to get him to give a confession, even to a crime that he didn't commit, just to make the suffering stop. Because it was through COVID, and they would put him in units with the worst offenders because they charged him with homicide. So all the worst of the worst he got stuck with. Guys that they wanted him to try and rough him up or try to intimidate him into saying or doing things that he otherwise wouldn't have. It was all intentionally done, and it was a game definitely played by Kenosha to mess with his head.
What day was he arrested, and what day was he convicted? Do you know?
He was arrested on May 19th, 2020. He was convicted. I guess the verdict, I believe, was March 22nd, 2023.
Talk to me about the judges on his case. How many judges did he go through?
Well, technically, Schrader was the main judge on the case, but there was a judge that handled the bail. So there were the initial hearings. I forget the term for them, but there were the initial hearings after his arrest where they determined bail, and then came back and had another hearing and readdressed the bail. And then and so that was a separate judge completely. Schrader was assigned to it eventually, but during the waiting for trial, Schrader had fallen and sustained a head injury with a brain bleed. And during the time where he was out for medical leave, there were at least two other judges that were involved in the case. One was Judge Wilkie, and another one was he was the Chief Justice. I can't think of his name off the top of my head right now.
That's okay.
So the Chief Justice in Kenosha. So total, that's 4 judges. Now there will be a 5th because now Schrader is retired. So there will be a 5th for post-conviction relief.
There was evidence presented at trial that Zach had a large amount of cash on him. I want to talk a little bit about that. Do you know why Zach would have? Do you know how much it was, and do you know why he would have it on him?
I think it was approximately $47,000. Now, within about a month of his arrest, give or take, I have the receipt somewhere. I'd have to look it up, but I mean, we have the withdrawal receipt from his investment portfolio where he withdrew $50,000 from his investments, and he did that to my conversation with him, with the intent of purchasing a property in sheriff's sale in Milwaukee County. He wanted to buy a property in Milwaukee County where he could change his address to, and then do his probation in Milwaukee for the charge in South Dakota. So he was highly motivated and had a property that he wanted to purchase in Milwaukee. He didn't get the property, so he had the cash, because you have a certain amount of time to come up with the money after you buy a property in sheriff's sale, and you have to do it very quickly. And one of the best ways to do that is just to have a large volume of cash on hand. So he had all that money. Now, I think that it is important to note while we're talking about it that $1,500 of that magically went missing. And I believe that there was other money on the property that was cited in the police reports that was never accounted for, that also went missing. So I think it's just something, if you're all going through police reports, some cops got sticky fingers somewhere and money went missing.
What date did you say that he might have taken money out of his investment accounts?
It was within about a month before he was arrested. I think it was in April.
Now, let's talk about cell phones. Zach had 2 cell phones, according to the police. Is that what you recall? Does that seem normal?
Zach wasn't a huge fan of cell phones. He didn't like the fact that potentially you could tap into a cell phone and listen to conversations on sites, and that was his understanding of what they could do with cell phones and track locations and doing all kinds of that stuff. And so he didn't like having them nearby. He was worried that people might be using the apps around him appropriately. And so he didn't keep smartphones for the most part in the house, almost at all. So when I was at his house, he asked that I leave my phone in the truck and I don't even bring it in his house. That was just a standard rule for his house. When I lived there, I was allowed to bring my phone on premise, but for the most part, he didn't want phones in his house, and that was just the way he was, or way he is. I guess he's still alive, but it was just the way he wanted it, and so he maintained a flip phone. Flip phone was enough for him. He didn't want to have to learn the interface. He was actually mostly unfamiliar with smartphones and smartphone apps and technology, and was kind of doing a crash course starting in 2020 to try and utilize smartphones, because so many things have transferred over to applications. He did use it for listening to music pretty regularly. Zach enjoys music. He listens to all kinds of music. He plays music and sings along and dances with the kids and does stuff like that. So that was a big piece of even his interaction or relationship with the kids. And my niece liked to play like flash games, so he had installed some flash games on the phone, and would like let her play games and stuff when they were hanging out.
Well, not to get down to a downer part, and to the extent that you can talk about it, there's a situation involving your niece and a cell phone that played into this case a little bit. Uh, can you talk about that, or to the extent you can talk about that?
Uh, yeah, I mean, so my niece had. Let me try and think about exactly how.
Your niece had an issue
My niece had an
that, yeah.
yeah. My niece had started to inappropriately use Snapchat and some applications on a smart device, and was largely not being monitored for that activity. And so it was brought to their attention that she was doing some things that were inappropriate, and her smartphone access was taken away during this time. Uh, Also, during this time, because her access was taken away, she made a point of attempting to gain access to it without her parents knowing, which meant that she stole my little sister's old cell phone twice, actually, during and around this time. It was somewhere between like April and May of 2020, somewhere in that time, where she had swiped my little sister's old, like unused cell phone, one that was just sitting like on a shelf in a room or something. And so she could have access on Wi-Fi to be able to utilize apps and continue to maintain whatever behavior that she was doing that was inappropriate. And that was, I think that's about all I can talk about.
Sure, no problem. Well, let's just say at some point, Sadie found your niece in possession of a cell phone that she wasn't supposed to have,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, that is true.
Now,
there
you
was
would say, oh, sorry, go ahead.
there was also like a phone that Zach had that he had given her access to at one point. That was in some of the police reports where Sadie had found her in possession of one of the Samsungs. So yes, there was a regular standard of behavior that had been established during that time, where my niece was then inappropriately taking and stashing cell phones to try and utilize later.
And you had mentioned that Zach, his general understanding of cell phones were that they could be used to track or listen in.
Mhm.
Did you know that Sadie had that same sort of belief?
I don't know that she did. I mean, from the trial and what I've seen, what she said was that she believed that somehow that Zach had figured out how to remotely hack into her device, but he didn't know how to do that. That's not. He never learned how to hack. He never learned how to code. He didn't learn how to access smart devices. Like, he didn't know how to interface with them. Like, he was kind of technologically in that aspect, he was kind of an idiot. Um, so the accusation is hollow.
Now I forgot what I was going to ask you. It was something about the phones. Damn it! What the hell was I going to ask? Oh, I know what I was going to ask. Did you ever have a conversation with Zach at all about how one would track someone using a cell phone or anything like that? Did he ever talk about that or
Nope.
desire to track anyone?
No. The only thing that we talked about that had anything to do with trackers was putting a tracker on my work truck and his van. And that was because he lent the van to me and potentially to my employees, and my truck, because he wanted me to be able to give my truck to my employee to then take it to a job site and then do work that would give me time in the office. And the concerns then as a business owner, is your employee on task, driving your vehicle, putting, product in, doing their job in a timely way, not being on their cell phones. And unfortunately, both my employees were, in their early mid-20s. So young guys tethered to cell phones. As soon as I'm not on site, magically their productivity tanks. So a lot of time is spent babysitting, trying to keep younger guys on task to get a job done. And that was a frustration.
There's a reason why I don't have employees anymore. Even adults, sometimes keeping them on task.
Yeah.
We just won't go there. I didn't track them though, but I wasn't also giving them my vehicle.
Right.
So fair enough. Now, the theory of the state's case, if I could just sort of summarize it, is on whatever date that was, April, May. What date was it? I can't remember. The alleged disappearance.
It was May 17th, 2020.
May 17th.
What day?
Yeah. So May 17th, 2020, your brother leaves all of his stuff at home, his cell phone and all this stuff, drives to Kenosha, unalives Rosalio, somehow takes his body, removes his body, drives back home so that he's able to make a call, and then somehow disposes of the body and leaves no trace. When was the first time that you heard that storyline?
In its completion during the trial.
During the second trial?
Yeah. Well, I mean, some of the opening statements of the first trial addressed it. They got into some of it in the first trial. So, yeah, that was the first time that I had heard that piece of it. Otherwise, I didn't have access to the discovery. I didn't have access to the police investigation or information. It's not like I had any knowledge of exactly what had transpired. So I was waiting for the trial to hear what they had even found, if it had any merit at all. So I had gone into the trial with the mindset that, he didn't do this. I didn't think it was in his in his, like I said earlier, his modus operandi. It wasn't in his behaviors. It didn't make sense. But I'd gone into it with the mindset that I was not going to be the person, getting interviewed afterwards. To the press. So I would never have seen this coming. I didn't want to be the person that was just star-eyed, completely, just mind blown at the end. So I wanted to approach it really looking for the evidence that he did commit it. And that was a big part of my personal experience with the trial. I wanted to see what was there. And there just wasn't anything there. Moreover, the things that they had didn't. They were full of holes. So the first time that I had heard this, at least in any form, was the mistrial in 2022. In its completion, the whole narrative that the state spun in March of 23.
Okay, so during the opening statement of the first trial in 2022. You hear this sort of narrative at the opening statement. What's going through your mind? What are you thinking?
Well, it was cut off really quickly, because even in those opening statements, the objections came pretty fast, because it was during the opening statements that the Brady violation happened, because the state presented information that was not handed to the defense, and that was the change of testimony from Nerita Macias. And that's a big deal, that they failed to turn over evidence to the defense and give them ample opportunity to provide a defense for it. And to my understanding, at that time, Nerita was at the right location and did not see Zach carrying anybody out. It was clearly exculpatory. It was clearly a piece of evidence that cited that Zach was not at that location, and there was an eyewitness there, direct evidence that said, nope, he was never there. Never saw anyone matching his description during this time window that the state is alleging that these acts happened. So that was about as far as they got. They didn't get into the rest of the narrative, with him being at home and the suspected, nighttime mission where he went down like SEAL Team 6 to extract, Rosalio out of his apartment, and in the dead of night. They didn't even get that far in the first one, but the first time I was just kind of shocked, and then had to figure out exactly why, the defense was objecting, exactly why it went to mistrial, what the terminology they were using meant, because they went back and forth about mistrial with or without prejudice and what they were asking for. So for me, it was a little bit of learning about the nuts and bolts of the legal system, as well as learning about the information presented.
Now, I know I promised you like an hour-long interview, and we've gone like an hour and 16. But I want to ask you a lot about the trial. Do you still have time, or do we need to continue this another day?
Fire away, David. Let's get it done.
All right. So I kind of want to go almost like witness by witness, but I that's probably going to be too cumbersome. So I'll just ask you like blankly, what were some of the issues that you saw during the trial? And I guess we'll start with Sadie's testimony.
I mean, Sadie's testimony was self-contradictory. She had contradicted her own statements on the stand multiple times, and she was trying to present as the credible eyewitness. She was the key witness to the entire case. So as I was watching her testimony, I couldn't comprehend how the jury was going to listen to what she was saying and then walk away after hearing her testimony and think that she was a highly credible witness. I didn't think she came across as credible. I didn't think she came across as genuine. She came across as someone with a lot of attitude and a bit of a chip on her shoulder, especially when dealing with Nicole. There was a difference between what she had rehearsed with the DA and then the cross-examination. And so for me, it was not good. It was really not good. And I found that fairly consistent, with most of the witnesses. They were mostly not credible. And that made me have a feeling like that if the jury just didn't like Zach, I could see them coming back with a guilty on stalking, just because they thought they didn't like him as as a parent, that they didn't like the trip or the idea that he brought his daughter to her home at night. But for me, it was like it didn't seem to add up, especially when it came to the verdict. When reflecting upon going into verdict, I thought that the state's case was very, very weak, and that the maybes in the closing statement really nailed down how weak their argument was. It didn't add up to dispel reasonable doubt.
What about Mr. Washington? I call him Mr. Washington. I mean, you lived with Zach for a little bit. You grew up with him. You lived with him for a little bit as an adult. Does Zach sleep talk?
No.
Ever?
No. Ever. Moreover, he's a very light sleeper, to the point where a mouse scratching in the house would wake him up in the middle of the night. It was actually one of the points of contention between us, is that I was bartending one night a week at that time, and I would come in very quietly, trying to be quiet, like making sure that I was tiptoeing, taking my shoes off through the house, making sure that I was as quiet as possible. And he would wake up every time, every single time. It didn't matter. He's a very light sleeper, and he does not talk in his sleep at all.
Now, Zach didn't testify. You know the area. Do you think that it might have helped him if he testified?
I think the people on the jury wanted to see him testify. In hindsight, hindsight being 2020. At the time, I didn't think he needed to testify, and there were so many gaping holes in the prosecutor's case that it didn't even make sense for him to take the stand because of how poorly their case went. The case in chief actually was presented. So at the time, I thought, no reason to testify. There's so much doubt in this case already that if you testify, it will give the prosecution an opportunity to attempt to make you look like a jerk on the stand and make you so unlikable that the jury will rule against you anyway. And so
I mean that's exactly how I thought. When I was watching the trial in real time, I'm like, I would barely put up a defense. I don't know who they'd call because the state did such a bad job.
Right.
Now the jury, to your knowledge, hasn't spoken.
Not a single one, to my knowledge, has come forward.
Okay. And let's talk about the feasibility of Zach actually being able to do this. He lived about an hour north of Rosalio's apartment, correct?
That's correct.
And the timeline. Explain to the timeline that we have based off of what the state presented.
Well, so the state presented in their case in chief that there was thumping, which they asserted was the demise of Rosalio Gutierrez at around 10 p.m. on May the 17th of 2020. The upstairs neighbors said that they heard something that sounded like banging on a wall somewhere between 10 and 11 p.m. They thought maybe a little closer to 10 p.m. on that Sunday night. That means that is the only witness that had some sort of established time that approximated the time of the hypothetical murder. So with that, then you have 10 p.m., even if we say 10 p.m., okay, 10 p.m. Then we have about 14 minutes from that time to when Rosalio's phone makes its final rotation, its landscape to portrait rotation on the phone records. So the last time the phone is manipulated is at 10:14, give or take, p.m. So in 14 minutes, give or take, Rosalio is terminated. The state says that he's wrapped up in his rug. The furniture is neatly moved. He is then carried out 10:10 p.m. He is then carried out and put in the back of Zach's van. This is what the state believes. So we have approximately 10 minutes for a murder and disposal of a body and crime scene cleanup. Now, you're a guy. I've taken poops longer than 10 minutes.
Fair enough, but
my point is, yeah, you can rush one. It's never comfortable, right? You don't get the full relaxation. My point is when you're doing that, how is that physically possible to wrap all that up, clean it up, and here's the caveat, not leave a single trace of your presence in that apartment? Not a single piece of evidence that they collected that tested positive with Zach's DNA. Not a single shred, not an allele, nothing. Nothing that connected Zach to that apartment whatsoever. Nothing. So for something like this to have happened, it would have had to been done rushed and imprecise. And they're claiming that he was able to commit the perfect murder and cleanup in 10 minutes, lift the man who weighed 260 to 280, somewhere in that range, carry him out and put him in the back of the van without any drag marks at all anywhere in the apartment, no drag marks left behind, with a bad back. So one of the reasons why Zach stopped working for AT&T was because he had a job site injury that prevented him from continuing to do his job. He had hurt his back so badly that he had continual follow-up and workers' compensation claims on treating his back injury. So he had a bad back, was supposedly supposed to be able to lift this man who weighed potentially 50 to 60, 70 pounds more than he did, and then walk him out and put him in the back of the van, and then had no symptoms of aggravating his bad back whatsoever. And after that, was able to drive and make it back to his home without any camera picking up his drive on the freeways, no traffic camera, no camera on a gas station, no camera between Rosalio's apartment and his home. Not a single one picked up either of his vehicles. All the while also leaving both of his cell phones at his home, active and on, registering that they were in his home the whole time.
How much time would he have to have, how much time did he have from 10:10 p.m. to get back to his home to use the cell phones when the state said he used the cell phones next? Wasn't it like an hour or something? I can't remember.
Yeah, so 11:19, I believe, is the phone call that he placed with Christine. So about 11:19 p.m., he made his first phone call back. Now, I want to point out that the path that you would have to take off freeway, because they live so far apart, would take the just over an hour drive. It was like somewhere between an hour 1 to an hour 5 from Rosalio's parking lot to Zach's driveway. That's using the freeway. That's the fastest routes. And with no cameras ever registering him on either of those routes, it would imply that he would have taken a different route entirely. All off freeway routes, all alternate routes, the fastest out of all of the alternate routes registered at about an hour and 25 minutes, which would have placed him outside of that time window. The state also alleged that Rosalio's body was in the back of Zach's van, so it's not like he was going to be driving like Speed Racer to make it there. He would have been making sure that he obeyed all the traffic laws, that he wasn't speeding, that he wasn't doing anything else that would then potentially get someone's attention while making the trip all the way back. It doesn't make sense. So when people claim that you can shave the time off the drive and there are ways to do it, that doesn't logically make sense either. There's no way that you would be driving like you're trying to Tokyo drift your way from Kenosha to Mequon, to make that time frame work and risk being noticed by police officers with a corpse in the back of your vehicle. That doesn't make sense at all. So no, it's not physically possible for him to have made it from Kenosha to his home, avoiding all cameras, all detection, completely with that amount of time. The state's timeline does not make sense. The other part is that they assert that his cell phone activity in different locations implies that he is in a certain location, but then they say, as an exception to the rule, that when they conveniently want him to be somewhere that isn't where his cell phone is active, they say that he just left it wherever he was, as opposed to any other time. So how do they know that some of his cell phones weren't in Sadie's possession during that time, when they're asserting that cell phones are traveling all over, to Rosalio's apartment or wherever they might be? They don't know that. They're asserting that Zach was in different places, following Sadie or whatever it was, but they have no idea where he was. They weren't there in his back seat watching him. They're just guessing. So they've asserted something, but they don't actually have the proof. And they tried to assert that Zach drove to Sadie's home, or to Rosalio's home, and that he was there earlier on May the 9th or May the 12th. And that he was, creeping outside a window, but they have no idea that he was there. They have no proof of it. It's really just Sadie's accusation that he said the same words that Rosalio had said in the apartment. And it wasn't May the 13th. It wasn't even in the moment. So it wasn't like Sadie claimed that he was repeating what Rosalio said when she received the text message. Her response was, "You texted the wrong person." And then the next day, she then accuses him of stalking her down there, which is convenient, because part of the aspect of stalking, which I know David, but part of the aspect is that you have to be fearful in the moment. You have to be fearful at the time of the action. And her response to him was naturally, "You just texted the wrong person," which implies that in the moment, she was not terrified or emotionally distraught whatsoever by what she later thought was him following her. That is not the truth of the matter asserted.
Now, I want to correct one of your earlier statements, or at least I want to make sure it's clear. You had said that it would take just a little bit over an hour to drive from Rosalio's back to Zach's home if he was to take, I think you said side roads, but is that the freeway you were meant to say?
Did I say side roads? Yeah. It would be about an hour 25 on the fastest side road track back to Rosalio's, or back to Zach's from Rosalio's. It was an hour and 1 to an hour and 5 on the interstate, taking the fastest possible route back to Zach's house from Rosalio's. So
were you able?
If I said that, I'm sorry, I misspoke.
No, I just want to make sure it was clear, because I think you said side roads. But now, were you able to identify cameras along the freeway?
We were. We have actually cited a bunch of freeway cameras. If you go to freezacharianderson.org, we have the map with the drive times and the routes. So you could actually go to our website, look at the routes, and get a clear map of pinned freeway cameras. And there's like 30 to somewhere between 30 and 40 cameras on the freeways, depending on which route that you take, and things like that. Just traffic cams that are out there. And the police did put in an inquiry with the DOT to see if there were any hits on his license plate at all, and there weren't. None. Not a single one.
I don't think I have any other questions for you at the moment. I think I got everything that I need. Is there anything else that you want to say that we might be able to use in the documentary?
That's a good question, because
I know there's a lot more to say, but I have other people that are filling in things, and I have testimony and stuff.
Yeah,
so I don't need you to say everything.
You need me to go through DNA evidence. You have that well covered. You've covered, the constitutional violations. I don't need to go into that. That's not really, that's like a Steve Gosney thing.
And like I said, if for some reason as I'm putting it together, I'm like, oh, I really wish I had so and so saying this, I might come back to you guys. The next thing, actually, you know what? I do have one more thing because hang on, my dog's barking. But I know the wrongful ladies are in the chat, and I am going to talk a little bit about sort of the media coverage and things like that. So do you want to talk a little bit about the media coverage and then sort of
that's actually a really good idea.
Yeah.
That's a very good idea, especially because that was like you mentioned, the title of the Law and Crime, the Court TV, for Zach's case, and it was something that I made sure to flame all the producers.
Hang on, someone keeps saying mailboxes. What is that?
They're talking about Rosalio's mailboxes. Rosalio's front door is adjacent to the mailboxes, and nobody, to my knowledge, followed up with any mail carrier, and no one ever claimed that they saw any of the blood dripping on Rosalio's door or door frame on Monday the 18th either. So out of all of the people that lived in that apartment, because it was an 8-unit apartment building, I believe, out of all the people that lived in that apartment, not a single one of them, when they checked their mail, then noticed any of the blood splatter or blood dripping on the door at all. Nobody did. Nobody reported it. Nobody commented on it. And every single person that lived in that apartment during that time was interviewed by police. So it's really adjacent to it. The state also asserted that they said like the surprise attack from behind the stairs. But if you looked at the stairs, you can see through the treads. So you can not only see through the treads of the stairs, you can't hide behind the stairs, but then you have the the actual the runner, I work in construction for 10
like
years.
The riser or the tread?
Not the riser and the tread, the actual framing. The skirt board.
Oh God, now I'm drawing a blank. I know exactly what you're talking about. All right, whatever. Yeah, we know what you're talking about.
Yep, that's not going to age well, though. I'm going to get made fun of for that one. Not the skirt. It's not the riser. The skirt board. No, not spindles either. You guys don't know what you're talking about. Anyway,
my God. Why can't I think of this? I just cut one. The
stringer. The stringers.
Stringer, thank you.
Oh my God. Half Irish with the victory. All right.
I was gonna Google it. I was gonna be real sad for myself.
Oh wow, that was painful. All right, so the stringers run in the open, so it's the stringer that spans from the second floor down to the first, and it's just open with the open handrail that goes up, so you could see somebody's legs when opening the door. You could see the legs, or you can see through the risers because there's no riser. It's just open on anyone that would be standing there. So this idea that there's like this insane surprise attack, it doesn't even make sense. Like you could see someone hiding there if that's the case. And otherwise, he had a peephole to look through into the hallway. It just, is it possible? Sure. Is it likely? No. It's not likely that you'd just be like running your head out where you could then get it, beaten in, by someone that knocked on your door and hid behind the stairwell. Like you're going to look, maybe crack your door and look out like, oh, that's weird. But your hand is going to be on your doorknob. And if somebody rushes you, you're going to slam your door shut. it doesn't, like, the behavior doesn't even make sense. Exactly what they're describing. They're saying that he just walked out into the hallway like a dodo bird to get biffed in the head. It doesn't make sense at all. The blood splatter in the hallway doesn't really add up to exactly what they were saying. I think that it's possible that Rosalia walked out and either walked out the patio door or walked out the main entry. I'm not sure, but it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't. Their narrative makes no sense. The mailboxes, I hear what you're saying. It's right next to the mailboxes. So all of this would have had to happen adjacent to these mailboxes. And anyone that would have been there to deliver the mail or anyone that would have been checking their mail should have seen some of the evidence or something. On top of that, we do have the tips of the woman smoking on Rosalia's patio on the 18th. We have the sounds of arguing inside the apartment on the 18th. All of that happened the day after he went missing. So there's that, and diffuser gate, the diffuser that was found still running. I don't know if you have anyone who's a specialist in diffusers, but the diffuser still running 38, 39 hours after the alleged time that Rosalia was last known to be texting on his device. It doesn't even add up with a feasible timeline that the scented oil diffuser would still have fluid in it, and there's no documentation of how much liquid was left in the diffuser when the police arrived and then photographed the crime scene, because there's a video and photograph evidence of the crime scene as they walk the crime scene. So for all the time that they were there, it was still running, because they had the first responders, the initial people that went out there. Then they had the people, the crime scene processors and the detectives that showed up. They had the video walkthrough, and all of that happened after, the initial responding officers. So we're talking 40 plus hours before the detectives were then doing the filmography, doing all of their camera work from the last time that this was known to be potentially handled by Rosalia Gutierrez. So this doesn't make sense. And it can't be on a switched outlet, because the device will turn off and then not reactivate on a switched outlet. So all of this doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense at all.
Talk to me about the media coverage.
Media coverage. So from Go, the fact that they gave it the title, the Obsessed Ex-Boyfriend Murder Trial, they did it for a little bit of shock value. They did it to try and appeal to people for clickbait. And this whole thing has been kind of disgusting, and it gave me a different perspective on media coverage of trials in general because of that, because they've turned it into this gross pursuit of profit. But what they haven't accepted is the responsibility for these people's lives that they're potentially ruining by tainting potential jurors that are not respecting the court's request that they don't look at any media coverage of the case at all. So it's undermining the actual justice system. We have district attorneys' offices like Gravely, like Kenosha, that are releasing misinformation to the public as well, and then news media that are taking these pieces of misinformation and then running it as fact, and then not retracting their false information. So to this day, they reported blood in Zach's van. There was never any evidence of blood in Zach's van. They reported an open can of sardines, and this was addressed during sentencing. And they implied in the news media that he had left an open can of sardines in his van as a way to potentially cover up a smell. It was a weird thing. Well, there was never an open can of sardines in his vehicle.
I believe they also said he had bleach. He had purchased bleach.
Yeah, they claim that he purchased bleach as well. And this is all misinformation. And it's really important that we recognize that police and prosecutors have started to utilize not just the mainstream media, local mainstream media, but social media as well, to try and push a narrative that whoever they have arrested is guilty without the proof, trying to press into this idea by tainting jurors, tainting the public mindset. So then when they're watching a trial, or when they're reading the news, they feel like justice is served. But what they're doing is undermining the justice system itself. And this is really something that has concerned me and shocked my system. Because now when I'm like tuning into your coverage of the Crumbly trial, or the Kohlberger trial, or when I'm looking back at the Murdaugh trial, I start thinking about how much misinformation that we're being fed, and what did or did not line up with what's being presented in the trial. And it's given me a lot more pause on, one, trusting our justice system, trusting the people that we've put in positions to ensure that justice is being done in our country, but also that the jurors are going to trial, with the jury of our peers are going to trial and looking at it, trying to maintain the innocence of the accused until the state proves that they're guilty, versus whipping up a rumor mill of misinformation. And that's terrifying as a citizen. It makes me worry for the integrity of where we're going. And Zach is one of many victims of what they've done in the last year. And there's more to come. And for those of you out there that don't get this, my brother is dear to me. I love my brother. I grew up with him. We went through a lot of hard times together. But my brother is not unique to the system and what they're doing to other people. They're doing to other people's brothers. They could be doing it to yours. So doing something about it is important.
Somebody asked in the chat, I think it's a good question. When did you stumble across LawTube covering this case?
When I knew that I couldn't attend in person, because of my class schedule, I needed to find a way to see the whole trial. And so I was looking for a way to try and watch the whole thing. And that's how I found LawTube.
What, obviously we have some very dedicated people behind Zach's case. We have the Wrongful Ladies, and we have a bunch of other people. Talk about that a little bit, and sort of what your thoughts are on this sort of group. There seems to be a group following around this case, and if you want to talk about that a little bit.
There is. I mean, it's a group of people that we're endlessly grateful for. Really, really devoted people that are putting in so many hours, so much of their time, their money, their resources, everything that they can into fighting for, honestly, perfect strangers. And we've become less strangers, over time. Like David, you and I have chatted about, even personal stuff, just the two of us off camera. But you're not the only one. The ladies are wrongful. So we've got Alicia, so Josie, and watching in the chat. Kayla I saw in here, and Ashley. I'm not sure. I don't know if I saw Ashley in here, but those four ladies got hella excited utterance that actually made the FCA logo, right? Like the logo
I
of the
tried to
channel.
find my mug for this, and I think it's dirty. I couldn't find my mug.
I actually had coffee in it, and I forgot to bring it down when I was getting everything ready to pop on stream. But the I love you sign that Hella turned into the FCA logo with the Z escaping, the Z escaping through the thumb. And so with that, you can see, the Z escaping through the thumb, the path to freedom, and Hella is still streaming on Excited Utterance. Crime Spies re-streamed the whole trial and has continued to fight for us. I saw her in the chat as well. Nicholas, special shout out to Nicholas Starro, Trial Watch. The amount of money that he's helped us raise, the amount of punishment that he's put his body through to try and get through that. We could not be more grateful for the time, the energy, the effort that you've all put in. And it's truly humbling to see everyone do that. Jeff over at Legal Vices too, going through and making sure to release stuff. David with Viva. So many people have added the FCA movement to their megaphone, and it has made a difference. And we've raised enough money to retain Natalie Wisco, thanks to all of you. We've gotten to a point where we have hope for the appeal, and hopefully we get through it in post-conviction relief, and we don't have to go to the appellate court, because it'll be another $40,000 if we go to the appellate court afterwards. And that's why we keep trying to raise money. And Excited Utterance was talking to me earlier today about how she feels like some of the focus on the fundraising for the FCA movement has fallen off now that we hit our 50,000. We've hit the 50,000 with the caveats being added afterwards. We still don't know what the travel expenses, the court fees, the everything else that get tacked on to the retainer. If we're going to have to purchase clothing for Zach, if it's going to go to a retrial, what the retrial might cost us, what the next round of the appeal, we have a rough idea of what the lawyer's retainer is, but then we don't know if there's going to be additional experts, additional arguments that need to be made, further up, further filings that need to be made even in the trial court if we get denied. All of these things are pieces that cost. All of these things will continue to cost time and money. And I know that everyone out there in FCA is praying that this gets resolved as soon as possible for Zach, for his children, for our family. And thank you. We could not be more grateful. But it's not over.
So that sorry, say it's not over again, because I cut you off.
But it's not over.
Perfect. That concludes my questions for you. I know chat is I had like 1,000 missed chats. I saw. So once again, if you guys are coming in late, this is an interview of Solomon for the purposes of the documentary. So I would ask a few questions and just let him go, because I'm going to edit this and put the documentary together. And I have a ton of other people that I have already interviewed, as well as others that I'm going to interview. So we don't need Solomon to talk about everything. Do you want to talk about April 1st?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. So David and I have been talking about restreaming the FCA trial, or the Wisconsin versus Zachariah trial. And we thought that there were a number of other people that were going to be restreaming the trial on the anniversary, which already passed. And it didn't seem to be happening. And so David and I talked about dual streaming just the trial during the day. And so what we're going to do is we're going to combine a couple of the days that are a little bit shorter. So it'll be 16 days, we calculated out. So it'll start April 1st and it'll end, I think the 16th was the day, right, David?
I think so. Sounds right.
Or the 15th, 2 weeks later?
Something like that.
So 15th, the 15th, tax day.
That's right. Yep, tax day will be the... Yeah, so we'll stream just the trial without us sitting on there, similar to what I've been doing with James Crumbly, just streaming the trial.
So it'll be just the trial streaming, and we're going to set it during the day, and we'll have it stream, and then in the evening, we were talking about doing a little roundtable where we get together and we do a live stream, and we just talk about what occurred during the trial, what things jumped out at us, revisiting it. And then those of you who want to see the unadulterated trial won't have talking heads. And then you'd be able to then tune in for our commentary, where we might be able to pull up little snippets and then talk about those moments afterwards. So that'll start April 1st and then end April 15th. And it'll be David and me, and then we might have some special guests to bring in and talk about some of the issues and nuance with the trial as we move through it. And that gives all of you a chance to soak it in a little bit, to refresh your memory, and then to get us to talk about it and then get worked up over the little things.
Yeah, and the other thing is that it'll actually help me, because I'm going to be rewatching the whole thing anyways. As part of this documentary, I got to splice everything together. So this is going to be a good way to redo it, have everything fresh, bring it to Solomon has his new channel. I have a lot more subscribers than I did when I first streamed the trial. So yeah, so we thought that would be a good opportunity to dual stream that, just a trial straight through, using Veilhammer Media's audio edited version, condensed version, and then do a roundtable. I thought that would be good.
Yeah, I think it's a nice way to break it up, and then you get to, I one of the biggest complaints that I've seen consistently through LawTube is for people that really want to watch the trial, people that feel like they want to really soak it in. Then they feel like they're missing moments when people are talking over it, when you have a whole panel of people. And so you kind of have like the drama of the courtroom then being overshadowed by the commentary. And so I thought this was a good way to approach it.
No Muppet songs.
Yeah. That's too bad, because I tell you what, David, I laughed. Actually, I needed that when I saw you play the Muppet theme song through it, because I mean, I get it that the trial was a joke, but like in the worst possible way. It was a tragedy type of joke.
But I was just watching it, and it turned into literally the Muppet Show. It was so ridiculous at times, and it wasn't the kind of ridiculous like the facts were ridiculous, or it was the prosecutor really was the butt of the joke every time. The DA, Gravely, he was just a disaster of a human being, and everything started with him, no matter what it was. Right. The Muppet Show, it was always like he was the cause of it, and it just became so frustrating that the Muppet theme song just seemed so appropriate.
Well, you went from like his water bottle tantrums to him learning what an argumentative question was to
he teaches law.
Yeah, to his endless list of leading questions to like he feigned
by the way
for the sake of doing what he wanted to.
I called it live that he was mouthing the answers to the witnesses when I first saw that. Just everything about him was just so ridiculous. It was like he put on his dad's suit and played adult for a couple of weeks and wanted to try a case. It was just a disaster.
But he knew how to manipulate the jury, and that's what he did.
He did. Well, and I say it a lot. The trial is it's a performance. It's a song and dance. The facts and the law are generally irrelevant by the time you get to the trial, unfortunately, because that's what the jury is supposed to be looking at, is the facts and the law.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a performance piece, and I still say that I always forget her name, the female attorney representing your brother.
It's Nicole Muller.
Nicole, she should have done the closing. I'm going to stand by that.
I agree.
I didn't like the guy who was doing it. Not that he's a bad lawyer. Again, it's a performance piece, right? Mm-hmm. And so when you have to shine on stage, use your best star. Put that A-list celebrity in that lead role, and they just didn't do that for whatever reason.
Well, she had actually established the rapport with the jury the whole time. So you have the one lawyer that has been making the argument, that established the relationship with the jury in trying to convince the jury that this is exactly what is the truth of the matter, right, in the defense. And then you pull her and then put the guy who's been silent in the jury's eyes the whole time up to do the closing. Why would you do that? Because there were very few statements that Kirk made in front of the jury, because most of his arguments were made with the judge outside of the presence of the jury. There were a few times that he did speak, but almost never with the jury present. And so he had almost no rapport with the jury, and it was just a fatal error, I think.
Yeah. I mean, who knows if it would have really helped, but it couldn't have hurt, and if anything, it would have helped. So that was my biggest disappointment in the was her not giving the closing. But oh well.
I mean, I think that there were some other disappointments, but I mean,
from a defense standpoint,
sure.
I thought the defense did well in their case in chief. Would I have liked to have seen a separate crime scene investigator testify? Yes, but actually, as you'll see when the documentary comes out, I interviewed a prosecutor, longtime prosecutor. He's like, why not use the state's witness? That's the best. If you can call up a state officer to testify against the state, why would you have your own witness? So I was like, all right, I can see that. But I was just talking strictly from the defense case in chief standpoint.
Yeah.
So anyways, that's about it for everyone in chat. You got 45 people watching. I don't know how many total views you got, but that's not bad for your first live stream on your channel.
I think that's actually pretty amazing for my first live stream, actually.
So all right, so guys,
thank you everybody for coming out to
and look for future streams starting April 1st, because I doubt Jen's gonna let him stream before then.
Look, I still got to finish this bathroom, and I'm doing that with taking care of the baby, who's, I mean, he's 11 months old this, I guess, in 4 days. So we've got an almost 1-year-old, and it's a big deal, but very busy, just trying to take care of everything around the house and set us up for success. So thank you all for your patience. I know that I haven't been on a lot of streams lately. I know that I haven't been out there in a lot of the chats, but it's because I've actually been working on the house, trying to get things taken care of. So Jen is much happier.
Yes. Got to keep the wife happy.
Happy wife, happy life.
That's right. I don't have an exit because I didn't want to do my normal stuff on Saul's channel. So we'll just say bye, y'all, and we'll see you on April 1st.
Thank you, everybody.
Oh, wait, here we go. Am I doing it right?